Hello, salud, konnichiwa. Happy Sunday, everybody, everywhere, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls. We got a banger for you today, but before we dive on in, do me a favor, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment in the comment section, all for Al Gore's rhythm. It's very important for Al Gore's rhythm. But let's go ahead, let's do this. Let's dive on in. What do we have here first? From Martoon, I've shared some charts from him before. Always like what he has to share. So we have USDC inflow, 1.114 and change billion, over 1.1 billion in USDC. Just flowed into exchanges well above the 700 million threshold. Typically seen before major dip buys. Okay, so what are we looking at here? We are looking at, I would say, a really interesting thing, which is, what do we call this? I'd say evidence of a disbelief rally, really. You can see historically when USDC inflows to exchanges are significant. I mean, there's lots of actually significant inflows of USDC to exchanges within the last few months here in 2025. But this particular inflow is higher than what we've seen since 2020, at least since 2020, I would say all time, honestly. And just look at all of these candles, whatever you want to call them, all of these lines, over 1.1 billion. So this green one is not actually a line, just FYI. But 1.1 billion, here we are. And what's the comparison here to previous times that we've gotten this high? Oh my goodness, excuse me. And I've already started and I'm not going to stop. So there's evidence of short-term upward movement. Short-term, okay? Nothing huge, but short-term upward movement, unless you want to compare this to the bottom at the end of 2022, which a lot of people do. Post-FTX collapse, a lot of people have compared that 74K bottom to the FTX collapse. So what do we have? We have something. We have potentially short-term upward movement. But, there's also plenty of times that kind of inflow preceded a chop. I would yield some bullishness from this, some bullish sentiment. Now, is this bearish? From Tony the Bull Severino. Bullish Bitcoin impulses tend to make it over 70 on the RSI in one swift move and stays there. The behavior on the RSI currently doesn't match the signature. It could come at any moment, however, so he does acknowledge that, yeah, we could have a swift move above 70 in RSI on the daily chart. You can see here, November, big move up in the RSI. And that was accompanied by a significant move higher, a belief rally. So what we are in right now, I would call a disbelief rally. This move in November was very much a belief rally. And this move in January, February, very much a belief rally. The move in November, I remember that move. I remember thinking that we would have a little bit more time to buy Bitcoin in the 20s. But no, November 2023, we broke up to the upside in a big way, and that was a significant belief rally. Now, even January of 2023, that was a significant move. That was a move that I think a lot of people, there were still plenty of people calling for Bitcoin to go to 12K, but this move was by and large communicated as the bear market's over kind of move. So here's the difference between what we experienced those 4 times that the RSI shot above 70, was that all of these involved significant levels of belief. Probably the biggest disbelief one was that January of 2023 rally. I remember that January 1st of 2023, we pumped. But otherwise, there was a lot of belief in the rest of these rallies. This is a disbelief rally, which means that we're not getting as much confidence in breaking to the upside. But, look at here in early 2024, we did kind of struggle around 70 in the RSI at the beginning of that upthrust. And then, boom, we went off in a big way. And I remember that was, Bitcoin around $53,000. I remember personally being like, that's a significant level. Can we break through $53,000? That's a 702 retrace. Once we broke through, then it was off to the races. So we're in a fine spot now. I don't, and I wouldn't say Tony Severino is saying anything with this as far as therefore it's time to be bearish, but it's something. You can see other times that we've hit 70 that we just, we hit 70 and we just chopped for a bit. Is this one of those times? Maybe we're going to chop for the next several months, but I tend to think that we will put in a new all-time high, and that there is something different about this rally from 74 to 104 than what we saw in previous rallies. There's a lot more fear in the market now. There was a lot more hope and optimism in the market those other times. So we'll see. Moving on from Tony Peterson here. Bitcoin, could it be so simple? In today's could it be so simple chart, I am not endorsing this. I'm not saying this is the way. I'm just saying, could it be this simple? I don't know. We'll see. But here we are. Green line, buying time. Orange line, things are fine. Red line, warning sign. Which, if you sold at the red line in 2020 to 2021, you sold pretty much at $20,000 Bitcoin. So not quite a warning there. And if you sold at the red line in 2015 to 2017, that bull run, no, that was a terrible time to sell. But I get the general gist here. It is something, especially if we're focused on diminishing returns, that maybe this is the norm for this time around. Like every time we've hit this red line, we have that was the time to sell. So maybe that's the theme for this cycle until something changes. So when we got to 74, that was the time to buy. 74 and change. Now we're kind of close to the orange line. I would call that yellow, but maybe my eyes are failing me. The orange line. So maybe we're still good. And red line, what would the red line be? You can't really tell on here, but I would think that's pretty close to $150,000. So will we see $150,000? If we do, red, that'll be around the red line, and that'll be maybe a good time to de-risk. But moving on, okay, Bitcoin, Johnny Czerny, I'm sure I mispronounced his name. Bitcoin's most recent correction never signal a cyclical bear market. This is really interesting. So Bitcoin net realized profit loss. And so people capitulated in previous bear markets. You can see 2014, 2015, not all that much. In 2018, I remember that very well. That was the minor capitulation. Bitcoin was hanging around $6,000, hanging, and then all of a sudden the pressure was too strong. The miners capitulated. It dumped over a span of 5 weeks from $6,000 to $3,000. Just felt like it was going to go down forever. And then that ended up being the bottom, and big spike down there, big selling at a loss at that point. And then the FTX collapse was the biggest collapse in Bitcoin's history in terms of realized profit loss, selling at a loss. And so you can see historically the sell-off that we saw that moved down to 74 and change was not all that different than other corrections in Bitcoin. Now, one thing I will say is altcoins, it felt much worse, as I'm sure many of you know. So we are just talking about Bitcoin here. But, that doesn't mean that this doesn't guarantee that we're going to hit a peak now, that we're going to have this big rally to higher highs. Look at what happened in 2021 after that big spike up in net realized profit, is that we did have several dumps or several lower points of selling at a profit. And so the average Bitcoin holder did sell at a profit recently, but there was never then a big upthrust in Bitcoin's price. And so there's no guarantees that there would be a big upthrust in Bitcoin's price. And again, a lot of people, there are some comparisons to what happened with tariff craziness and the FTX collapse, but not when it comes to net realized profit loss, not at all. I would say this is overall a bullish chart. Okay. It's not perhaps as bullish as I think a lot of other people would take it. Like Marty here, higher we go. Okay, we'll see. I agree, but it is what it is. Okay. I found this chart to be interesting from Bitcoin Magazine Pro. Sell in May and go away, ? Will you sell in May and go away June through September for Bitcoin? I remember 2024 for altcoins in May was a good time to sell. All right, but for Bitcoin, it was just a chop, really. So will you sell in May and go away? June through September are typically the lowest performing months for Bitcoin, although have still historically provided 12.03% total returns on average. Let me know your strategy below. Here's the thing I want to point out from this chart is I just look at historically the returns. This is what I've been warning about. This is what my friend Devin has been warning about when it comes to a mentality of selling in May and going away. It's just the chop will kill you. It's just murder, and people are so married to their charts. They need their charts to provide with them with these amazing returns, or they're going to go crazy. And the summer, Northern Hemisphere summer months just don't provide that historically. Now, what we've seen in the early part of 2025 post-halving year is an outlier. And so maybe this time around is going to be an outlier. But my perspective, and I think it's a good perspective to have, I would encourage you to have this perspective, is to just not have super high expectations for the summer. I mean, you have July, which is historically fitting well with the rest of the year, but June and August and then September is historically the only red month in Bitcoin's history, on average. Maybe this time's different again, but this is why we say sell in May and go away. It's not literally hit the sell button in May. It's just lower your expectations a little bit and enjoy, if you're in the Northern Hemisphere at least, your summer vacation. Okay, moving on, we have the Bitcoin 2-year SMA multiplier. This is pretty interesting to me. So we have the very first epoch, hitting the 2-year SMA X15, the very upper band, and also in 2013 doing that 2 times. And then in 2017 doing that at the 2-year SMA X10. So we have diminishing returns going on here. And then in 2021, the first peak in 2021, doing the 2-year SMA X5, second peak, even though it was a higher high, hitting the 2-year SMA X 2.65. And then here we are in 2024 doing the same thing as we did at that second peak in 2021. The 2-year SMA X 2.65. This time around, when we got to 108, 109, we did not quite get there. But maybe this is the name of the game again. 2-year SMA X 2.65 would be a decent amount higher than where we are right now. Again, maybe around 150 or so. Not something I can guarantee you that I'm going to be monitoring, but I do follow Alpha Ractal here. And so maybe that would be the case. Okay, 159. I'm seeing the tweet here. I should have paid attention to that before. Currently, the 2-year SMA X 2.65 level sits at approximately 159,000. Of course, the longer we go, let's say this does go into 2026 or 2027, as I have been postulating, which I'm a little wavering on that now, but let's worry about that in the future. Then, of course, this 2-year SMA X 2.65 would actually be a decent amount higher than $159,000. Or maybe we hit $159,000 and then we dump, and then we, before the next halving, sometime in 2027, revisit that 2.65 level. But, something to pay attention to. Will it ever be that we would hit that X15 again? Gun to my head, I'm just going to say yes. And the reason why I'm going to say yes is listen, if I'm wrong about the end of 2025 being bearish, which let's see what happens with the stock market. If we're going to have a V-shaped recovery, then I'm probably wrong about the end of 2025 being bearish. Then I'm not wrong. There's something I'm not wrong about. And I think that we do have a lot of pain coming at some point. And maybe it'll take a year. Maybe it'll take 2 years. Maybe it'll be 2029 when the S hits the F. But there's going to be a time when there's going to be a lot of pain. And I think Bitcoin will break to the downside. And then I wouldn't be surprised after that also if Bitcoin broke to the upside. We shall see. Interesting times that we live in. Moving on. Global M2 compared to MSTR. We've seen a lot of these global M2 charts, But I just, the thing that sticks out to me about this one in particular from Brett here, I love his stuff, give him a follow, is, you know, what he says here, global M2 appears to have a massive leg up in the second half of May. And we are right now in the second half of May. So it may be that MicroStrategy, and you could probably conclude Bitcoin as well, for the second half of May have a significant leg higher. We'll see, but if we're going to continue to follow M2, that would be the case. And I hope that we do. I think we will deviate from M2 at some point soon. But I tend to lean towards we're going to continue to follow this for a little bit longer. Okay, moving on. Dow Jones, do not be scared by this chart because it's not entirely what you might think here. So Dow Jones 2005 versus 2028 update. The Dow must sell off heavily in the next 2 weeks or so to mirror 2008. Otherwise, the comparison is void. Here we go. So can we make it through these next 2 weeks? That's the question. And man, you know, I'm looking at the stock market. It's doing better than I thought it would be. I'm fully admit that. Is this a V-shaped recovery? Is this a 1998? Is it a 2018? Is it a 2020? Or is it a 2008? We're going to find out very soon. And whatever comes next is going to shape my perspective for not only the remainder of the year, but the remainder of the next few years. So, man, these next few weeks are very important. Lastly, guys, scientists at CERN's Large Hadron Collider have successfully transformed lead into gold atoms, achieving an ancient alchemist's dream through modern physics. Okay, let's click on the next picture. Oh no, I thought I knew what this was. I don't. So, all right, let's just read this from Ran Neuner. This is really bad for gold. Scientists can literally... Can you just, all right, I'm skeptical of this guy's alarmism. I mean, can you hear the extreme language in his voice? I just want to point that out. This kind of stuff, I have a nose for it, and it kind of drives me crazy. But all right, this is really bad for gold. Scientists can literally recreate gold in a lab, and this makes gold no longer scarce. For those that think I'm being an alarmist or dramatic, study the diamond chart. This is the diamond chart, okay? But the color isn't gold. That's what confused me. For those that think, all right, study the diamond chart since the same thing happened and scientists created lab-grown diamonds. Neither the human eye nor with a mag glass can tell the difference, and the cost is about 1% of the original. Once people realize this, there will be a huge shift for Bitcoin into Bitcoin. I'm skeptical, guys. I'm skeptical of this being a threat to gold. Okay, it's just diamonds. Diamonds, here's the difference between gold and diamonds. Diamonds aren't actually scarce. They were never scarce. And so the creating of a diamond in a lab just kind of accentuates the non-scarceness of diamonds. We're going to do this with gold. No, I don't think that you know, this thing that's worked for thousands upon thousands of years as a form of hard money is all of a sudden going to be threatened by it. But, you know, maybe Ran is correct here and I'm wrong. Just wanted to point that out. I'm still a mega bull for gold over the next decade or 15 years. But we'll see. Anyway, that is all I have for today. I hope you have a wonderful day, wonderful weekend, and I will most certainly be seeing you in another video.